The sky of Vellery Prime was not blue, but violet. Two suns shined down on the stone citadel, high in the mountains where the warrior caste lived. Jackson, a human soldier, stood at the edge of the great steps, staring up at the towering palace. His uniform was dusty, his boots worn, but his eyes held no fear. Suddenly, the massive doors of the citadel opened with a deep groan. Out walked four tall alien women, each glowing faintly with energy. Their skin was smooth and slightly metallic, their eyes bright like twin moons. They wore armor that showed power, and they moved with the grace of predators. The eldest one stepped forward. She was taller than the others, with silver markings across her arms and a long braid hanging down her back. Her name was HFY. She crossed her arms and looked at Jackson with a cold smile. "My sisters say you're too weak for us," she said, her voice soft but sharp. "We don't take weak males into our clan. But if you think otherwise, prove it." Jackson didn't move. He stared back into her glowing eyes. "Then give me the chance," he said, his voice steady. The other sisters laughed, except the youngest. She stood at the back, her gaze curious, almost nervous. Her name was Lyra. She didn't laugh. She watched him closely, as if she saw something the others missed. HFY turned her back and walked up the steps. "You will be tested," she said. "If you survive, you may stay.
Out.
If not, your bones will feed the mountain birds." Jackson followed. Inside the citadel, the walls were covered in trophy skulls, weapons, and strange artifacts. Alien guards watched him as he walked through the halls. He felt the weight of every gaze, but he kept his head high. They entered a large chamber. It was empty except for a long table and several glowing crystals floating above it. HFY gestured for him to kneel. He did. "You are far from Earth," she said. "Our kind does not believe in kindness. We believe in strength, will, and dominance. You will face trials every day. Will be sent away or worse." "Understood," Jackson replied. She leaned down slightly, her voice colder. "You will be given no weapons, no aid, no mercy. And my sisters will judge you. All of them think you will break. I agree. But I am willing to let you suffer for our entertainment." Jackson clenched his fists but kept calm. That night, he was given a small stone room with no bed, just a mat on the floor. Tiny windows showed the two moons outside. He sat in silence, thinking. Suddenly, he heard a knock. He stood and opened the door. It was Lyra, the youngest sister. She stepped in quickly and closed the door behind her. Her face was serious, not playful like the others. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Then why are you?" Jackson asked. She looked into his eyes. "Because I don't think you're weak. I've read about humans. Know what you've survived. You're different." Jackson didn't know what to say. She pulled something from her cloak. It was a small Discalian tech, glowing softly. "Take this," she said. "It will scan the terrain tomorrow and help you avoid traps." "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Lyra paused. "Because I'm tired of my sisters thinking they know everything, and maybe I want to see them proven wrong." He could answer. She turned and slipped out of the room. The next morning, Jackson stood in the training field. The other sisters watched from high balconies. HFY raised her hand. "Begin," she shouted. The first trial started. Alien beasts were released from metal gates. The ground trembled as they charged toward him. Jackson's hand went to the disc hidden in his sleeve. It blinked once, showing him a weak spot in the stone floor. He dodged to the side, lured the beasts toward the cracked area, and jumped back just in time. The ground broke under the beasts. They fell into a pit. The sisters leaned forward, surprised. Jackson stood. Tall, breathing hard. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He simply walked to the center and waited for the next challenge. From her balcony, Lyra smiled faintly, and HFY narrowed her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, the human wasn't weak after all. But the real challenge was only beginning. A thin mist rolled across the mountain arena before sunrise. Jackson stood alone, stripped of armor, his skin marked with dirt and bruises from the previous trial. The sisters had summoned him again. This time no guards waited for him, only silence and a heavy iron door at the far side of the courtyard. The door creaked open slowly. Jira appeared, dressed in ceremonial red and gold. Her sharp gaze locked. "On to Jackson." She said nothing at first, letting the silence stretch and wrap around him like a rope. Then she raised her arm and pointed to a narrow tunnel behind her. Heat poured from it. Jackson could feel it even from the courtyard. The stones near the entrance shimmered, like air above fire. "Today," she said, "you walk the burning path." Jackson tilted his head slightly. "What is it?" "Path. Of pain, fire, and vision," she answered coldly. "Many warriors walk in, few walk out. Test your body, your mind, and your memory. You will be alone. There will be no mercy." They didn't reply. Instead, he stepped forward. Zhera raised one eyebrow. "Still eager to die human?" "I came to prove myself," Jackson said, his voice calm. "So, let's see what your fire can do." Without another word, he walked past her and entered. The tunnel dud, the heat hit him like a wave. The path curved downward, lit only by glowing red stones on the walls. The floor was hot beneath his boots. As he moved deeper, the temperature rose with every step. Sweat dripped down his face, and his breathing grew harder. Suddenly, a thin beam of red light shot from the wall. It grazed his shoulder and burned through the fabric, leaving a small mark. Jackson quickly ducked and rolled forward. More beams appeared, slicing across the tunnel in patterns. He realized it was not just a trial of heat, but a maze of deadly traps. He reached into his sleeve and pressed the disc Lyra had given him. It buzzed once and then flashed a symbol, guiding him to the left side of the path. He moved carefully, counting seconds between each beam, using timing and speed instead of strength. As he turned a corner, a strange gas sprayed from the ceiling. He covered his face, but it was too late. The world around him twisted. The walls seemed to breathe. Shadows grew longer and formed shapes he recognized, faces from his past. Voices he hadn't heard in years. His commander's voice echoed in the tunnel. "You let your unit die, you're no hero, Jackson." He gritted his teeth. The gas was trying to break his mind. He forced himself to walk forward, each step like dragging chains. He saw images of war, of friends who didn't make it back, of choices he regretted. But then another voice broke through, softer, familiar. "I don't think you're weak." Lyra's words, spoken quietly the night before, pierced the illusion. Jackson blinked. The walls stopped moving. The shadows faded. He took a deep breath, pushed forward, and stepped into the next chamber. Flames danced across the floor. A long stone bridge stood above a river of lava. The heat burned his eyes. One wrong step, and he would fall. Jackson stared at the path. Bridge was broken in places. Some stones were loose, some burned red. It would take speed, balance, and trust in his own body. He ran. Each jump was a decision, each landing a test. At one point, the stone beneath his foot gave way. He slipped and nearly fell into the fire, but grabbed the edge of the next slab and pulled himself up, using only his arms. By the time he reached the end, his chest burned, his legs trembled, and his shirt was soaked. He was alive. The tunnel opened to a wide platform. Above it was a single crystal hanging from the ceiling. It pulsed with a golden light. Jackson stepped forward. The moment he touched the crystal, the heat faded. The tunnel cooled. The door ahead opened on its own. He emerged into daylight, stumbling slightly, blinking against the sun. The sisters were already waiting. Jira stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The second sister, tall and fierce, whispered something to the third. They all looked confused. Jackson was supposed to fail. Instead, he walked out stronger. Only Lyra smiled. Her eyes met his, proud and bright. Jira finally spoke. "You completed the burning path. That is rare. For a human, it is. Expected." Jackson didn't smile. Dee stood tall, breathing hard, and said nothing. Jira stepped down toward him. For the first time, her tone held something different. "Tell me, human, are you lucky, or did someone help you?" Jackson looked her in the eye. I survived because I'm not weak. Isn't that what you wanted to see? Jira narrowed her eyes but said nothing. Lyra spoke softly from behind. He didn't need luck. He needed a reason. Jira turned to her youngest sister with a suspicious glare, but Lyra met her stare calmly. Jackson remained still, silent, knowing the next test would be even worse. And deep inside the Citadel, plans were changing. The sisters were not just testing him anymore. They were beginning to fear that he might actually pass them all. The wind was cold that morning, blowing across the stone courtyard like knives. The sky above was clouded, casting shadows over the Citadel. Warriors gathered in the upper balconies. They whispered to each other in their native tongue, watching. With interest and doubt, the human was still alive. It was already a surprise. Jackson stood in the center of the arena, bare hands at his sides, muscles sore from the previous trials. He didn't complain. He had learned by now that showing pain was a sign of weakness in this place. A horn blew across the mountain range. Jira stepped forward once more, her face as fierce as ever. She spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Today the human faces the arena of shame. This test is not about fire or traps. It is about humiliation, about stripping away his pride. He will face it without weapons. He will not leave until he earns our respect or loses everything. At her signal, a gate opened. At the far end of the arena, two massive creatures stomped out, covered in bone armor, their legs like tree trunks and arms tipped with razor-sharp blades. Their mouths dripped with thick green saliva. Their red eyes locked onto Jackson. Gasps rose from the balconies. There, using the blade hounds, someone whispered, "That's not a test. It's an execution." Jackson didn't move. He looked at the beasts, calculated their weight, the way they moved, the sharpness of the blades. He had no weapon, no shield. Only his hands and his mind. The creatures roared. Jackson took off running, not away from them, but toward them. It shocked the sisters. No one ran toward bladehounds. The creatures charged as well, their feet shaking the arena ground. Jackson waited until the last second, and then dove to the side. Dust flew up. One of the beasts spun around, its blade slicing. The air just inches from his back, he rolled, grabbed a loose piece of debris from the ground, and hurled it at the second beast's eye. It bounced off harmlessly, but the distraction worked. Jackson sprinted toward a broken pillar and jumped on it. From there, he climbed the wall quickly, using the cracks between stones. The creatures followed, slashing and howling. Jackson jumped off the ledge, landed behind them, and kicked one of the legs. It barely reacted. He looked around again. That's when he saw a thin chain holding the gate up. It was still hanging above the arena. He ran toward the wall again, climbed fast, and leaped toward the chain as the bladehounds came beneath him. Jackson swung across, then dropped onto one of their backs. It roared and twisted, but Jackson held on. He wrapped his arms around its neck and began pulling hard. His goal wasn't to strangle it, but to block its breathing for just a second. The beast crashed into the wall, trying to shake him off. Jackson let go just in time. The bladehound's head hit the stone hard, collapsed with a groan. The second one came immediately. Jackson grabbed one of the fallen beast's blades and used it to defend himself. The alien weapon was heavy, but he used the creature's own weight and momentum against it. He ducked, moved, turned, and waited. Then, when the beast rushed, Jackson slid beneath it and drove the blade into its knee joint. It howled in pain and fell to one side. Jackson didn't kill them. He could have, but he didn't. He stood in the middle of the arena, breathing heavily, covered in sweat and dust, but alive. Two bladehounds lay around him, defeated, not dead. Silence. No one spoke. Not the warriors. Not the sisters. Jira stepped down slowly, her boots echoing on the stone. She looked at the beasts, then at Jackson. "You didn't destroy them," she said. "They were not the enemy," Jackson replied. "They were tools in your test." Jira's eyes narrowed. "You're smarter than you look." He said nothing. From the balcony, one of the other sisters leaned forward. Her name was Vasha, the second eldest. She had been laughing in the last. 2 trials, but now her face was serious. "Why spare them?" she asked. "Because strength isn't always about killing," Jackson said. "Sometimes it's about knowing when not to." A few warriors murmured in agreement. One even nodded. Lyra stood silently beside her sisters, her eyes filled with something new, not just admiration, but hope. Jera wasn't smiling. Her pride was wounded. She had expected him to fail, to fall, to beg. But he had stood tall and proved his mind was as sharp as his body. She turned and walked away. "Prepare him for the next trial," she said, her voice tight with control. "This one might have a brain, but we'll see if he has a heart." As the arena cleared, Jackson was left alone once more, his hands trembling slightly now that the fight was over. He looked up toward the citadel. He knew the next challenge would not be about strength or speed. It would test something deeper, and if he failed that, no weapon or clever trick could save him. The night air was cool and heavy with silence as Jackson sat on the cold stone floor of his small chamber. The day's battles still echoed in his mind, but exhaustion was slow to come. Suddenly, a gentle tap came at the door. He rose and opened it carefully to find Lyra standing there, her eyes reflecting the pale moonlight. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her voice soft but urgent. "I couldn't let you face the last trials alone," she said, her gaze steady. "There is more to these tests than strength. Sisters hide secrets. You need to understand them if you want to survive." Jackson watched her closely. She seemed different from the others, less harsh, more thoughtful. He nodded, motioning for her to continue. She moved closer and lowered her voice. "Our family is bound by tradition, but also by fear. The eldest sisters fear losing power, and they will use every trick to break you. But I see something in you, strength not just of body, but of spirit that is rare here." Jackson felt a strange calm settling over him. "Why help me?" he asked. "Because sometimes change must come from outside," she replied. "Sometimes the weakest are the strongest when no one believes in them." She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, ancient-looking pendant. "This belonged to my mother. It holds memories of our people, their pain, and their hopes. When you wear it, you may glimpse what has been forgotten." Jackson accepted the pendant, its weight heavy with meaning. As he fastened it around his neck, a soft warmth spread through his chest. Lyra led him to a hidden corridor behind the chamber walls. The passage was narrow and lined with glowing glyphs. As they walked, the symbols pulsed faintly, filling the air with a quiet hum. "This is the Hall of Ancestors," Lyra explained. "Here you can learn what shaped our sisters. You will see visions of their past, how they became who they are." At the end of the hall, a large stone door opened into a vast chamber filled with floating lights and shifting shadows. Jackson stepped inside, feeling the pendant grow warmer. Suddenly, images appeared before him. He saw the alien sisters as children, bound by harsh training and strict rules. He saw battles lost and won, betrayals and sacrifices. He saw the pain behind their cold faces, the loneliness hidden beneath their power. Jackson's heart ached for them. They were prisoners of their own legacy. When the visions faded, Lyra's voice broke the silence. "Now you understand. To win, you must not only fight with your body, but with your heart and mind." She looked at him, her eyes shining. "You must decide, will you be a weapon of war or a force for something new?" Jackson took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the choice. He knew the next trial would test him like never before, not with beasts or fire, but with the truth of their world. Together they left the chamber, stepping back into the cold night. The sisters above watched from their balconies, unaware that the human and the youngest sister had begun to change the fate of their clan forever. The sun rose slowly over the jagged peaks surrounding the citadel, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Jackson stood alone, his muscles still tight from the visions he had seen the night before. The weight of the pendant around his neck felt heavier now, as if the memories it carried were settling deep inside him. Suddenly, the heavy gates of the arena slammed open. Gira appeared, her eyes sharp and unreadable. Her armor gleamed under the morning light, and the pride in her stance was clear. She approached without a word and stopped just a few feet from Jackson. "This is the final test before you may join our clan," she said coldly. "A battle between equals. No tricks, no allies, just you and me." Jackson met her gaze steadily, knowing this was the moment everything depended on. The other sisters gathered on the balconies, their eyes fixed on the pair below, whispering. Among themselves, the tension in the air was almost unbearable. Without warning, Gira moved like a flash of silver, charging forward with a fierce roar. Jackson barely had time to raise his arms to block. The clash of their bodies echoed through the arena. She was strong, faster, and experienced. But Jackson had something else in his mind. He dodged a crushing blow and twisted, catching her arm. Gira tried to break free, but Jackson held tight. He used her momentum to throw her to the ground. For a moment, he saw surprise flash across her face. Gira recovered quickly and launched herself back at him. They circled, each testing the other, neither willing to give an inch. Sweat dripped from their brows as the fight grew more intense. Every move was a battle of wills, not just strength. Jackson remembered Lyra's words, the strength of spirit, the power of heart. He focused not on breaking Gira's body, but on understanding her. He felt the rhythm of her breath, the tension in her muscles, the fire in her eyes. With a sudden shift, he caught her hand and pressed his palm against her chest. The motion was gentle, but firm. Gira froze. For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them. Jackson whispered, "I don't want to break you. I want to stand with you." The crowd below gasped. The sisters exchanged shocked glances. Gira's expression softened, but only for a second. She nodded slowly and stepped back. "You are unlike any human I have met," she said quietly. "Fight not just with your body, but with your soul." Jackson lowered his arms, exhausted but victorious. He knew this battle was not just about strength, but about respect and trust. Gira extended her hand, and he took it without hesitation. From the balconies, the sisters watched silently, realizing the meaning of this moment. The human had not only survived, but had changed something within their hearts. Lyra smiled brightly, her eyes shining with pride. Jackson looked up at her, feeling a connection stronger than any trial. The path ahead was still uncertain. But one thing was clear. He had proven them wrong, and he was no longer alone. The grand hall of the Citadel was alive with whispers and tension as the four alien sisters stood before Jackson. The walls, carved from ancient stone, echoed the soft murmur of the gathered crowd. Their eyes glimmered with anticipation and uncertainty. Today was the ceremony of choosing, a tradition older than memory. The time had come for one sister to claim the human as their own, nor for him to be rejected by all. Jackson stood at the center, his heart steady despite the weight of so many gazes upon him. The youngest sister, Lyra, stepped forward first. Her voice was calm but full of meaning as she spoke. "Jackson, you have survived every trial, faced our tests with courage and honor. The bond we share is more than strength. It is respect and understanding." Before he could respond, Gira moved ahead. Her presence was commanding, the air around her charged with power. "I have tested you with fire and blade," she said, "and though you surprise me, this is not the end. Our bond will be one of duty and strength. Choose me, and you will stand with the fiercest warriors in the galaxy." The third sister, Vasha, stepped forward, her eyes sharp and calculating. "Strength is more than muscle," she said. "It is will and wisdom. Offer you guidance through our ancient knowledge and secrets. Together, we can rule and reshape this world." The last sister, silent until now, finally spoke with a quiet voice that carried through the hall. "I offer loyalty and peace," she said, "not just to you, but to all who seek a better path." Jackson looked at each of them, feeling the weight of their offers and the hopes they placed in him. He knew his answer would not only decide his fate, but could change the course of their world forever. He took a breath and spoke clearly. I will not be chosen by power or fear. I stand for something greater, a future, where strength is tempered by honor, where we fight not to dominate, but to protect. I ask you all to walk that path with me. The hall fell silent. The sisters exchanged looks, their pride and tradition challenged by his words. Then, slowly, Lyra stepped closer and took his hand. The others hesitated but followed her lead. Joining hands around Jackson in a circle of unity, in that moment, the ancient walls seemed to breathe with new life. The old ways would not be forgotten, but they would be transformed. Jackson was no longer just a human soldier. He was part of a new legacy, one forged by courage, respect, and a bond that none could break. The sun dipped low behind the jagged mountains, casting a fiery glow over the citadel. The grand hall was filled with the whispers and curious glances of every warrior, noble, and servant present. Tonight was not just a ceremony. It was a moment that would echo in the history of their clan for generations to come. Jackson stood in the center, surrounded by the 4 alien sisters who had once doubted him. Their expressions were a mix of pride, respect, and something new, admiration. Jera, the eldest, stepped forward with a slow, deliberate grace. Her eyes softened as she reached out and placed her hand over his heart. You have proven yourself. Not just in battle, but in spirit, she said, her voice steady yet full of emotion. You are not what we expected. You are stronger. Lyra, the youngest sister, smiled brightly, her eyes shining like stars. She stepped close and intertwined her fingers with his. You showed us that strength is not only muscle and power, but also courage and heart. The other sisters nodded, their earlier pride giving way to acceptance. The bond they formed that night was unlike any before, a union of human and alien. Tradition and change, strength and compassion. Jackson looked around at the crowd. The warriors who had once jeered now bowed their heads in respect. The citadel, once cold and filled with challenges, now felt alive with hope. He turned back to the sisters. I came here to prove I was not weak. But what I have learned is that true strength comes from standing together. Jera smiled, a rare and genuine smile. Tonight, you are no longer just a soldier from another world. You are part of us.
Yes.
The stars began to fill the sky. The ceremony concluded with music, laughter, and the celebration of a new beginning. The sisters and Jackson stood side by side, united in a bond that would change their world forever. The human soldier who was once seen as too weak had proven them all wrong, not by breaking their traditions, but by becoming a living bridge between worlds, showing that courage, respect, and heart are the greatest powers of all. The Citadel's walls would remember this night always, and so would the stars above Asterisk.